All right, so I'm here with one of the apple trees in our yard. This is a crab apple, and I thought it was time to tell you about Johnny Appleseed. He really did exist. His name was John Chapman. If you've ever tried growing an apple from seed, that's what John Chapman did. He planted them from seed. But here's the weird thing about apple genetics. There's a 1 in about 20,000 chance that that apple seed will grow into a tree that makes a delicious tasting apple. Most will be like this one right here, which is going to be a crab apple. Crab apples used to be called cider apples. So if you remember in history, you were told Johnny Appleseed planted apples so that the settlers had apples for nutrition. He planted them for hard cider, for booze. Back then, there was no refrigeration, so planting apple trees was a great way to provide fruit juice, because if you fermented it a little bit, it didn't go bad. That meant kids would have a small glass of hard cider in the morning. We retold the story of Johnny Appleseed, or John Chapman, during Prohibition because apple growers freaked out. Now you're wondering, where do edible apples come from? So I'm going to show you. All right here, do you see where it's got this weird little knob? This is called a graft scar. This type of crab apple that we have here, which is, believe it or not, called a snowball crab apple, only happened once through genetics. What they do is they grow other rootstock from apple seeds, and when it's at a certain size, they cut it off and they put in a branch. It's called grafting right there, so this is called a graft scar. Almost every apple tree you see is grafted. Here's another graft scar. This one had a little bit of a rougher childhood. It was a rescue tree from the nursery for $5. But as we go up its trunk, you'll see it's doing quite well. All right, so here I am with one of our few apples that actually makes edible apples. This year it got a little frost burn, so it's probably going to be non-fruit producing this year, which is a bummer. Cool thing is that means in future years it'll be delicious because it's going to make more apples in future years. Oh, I forgot to tell you. How many of you have heard the phrase, something is as American as apple pie? Apple pies come from apples originally grow wild in Kazakhstan. Fortunately, I'm going to splice in a photo from my friend Morgan Abbey, who is living right at the place where apples were found. The name of her town is Homeland of Apples. Sorry for the poor translation. But once again, you'll see this one has a scar. See? So, where do apples come from? Like if you like Golden Delicious or Macintosh, each time they find a delicious apple, companies like Starks Brothers, which is an apple supplier, will actually buy the tree or buy the rights to the tree, and they'll start cutting off little branches in the fall. In about February. And then they splice those into rootstock. So apples have really cool history. The Granny Smith apple came from Granny Smith's farm. Other ones, like the Red Delicious, the name was patented before they even found a Red Delicious apple. One of my favorite apples from Wisconsin is called the Wolf River apple, and when it's grown well, apples will be so big it only takes 2 apples to make a pie. So cool things about plants and their history. The apples come from Kazakhstan. Wheat for apple pie actually comes from the Middle East. The cinnamon, I believe, comes from India. And the sugar comes from places like the Caribbean. So when we're talking about something being as American as apple pie is a true melting pot of delicious awesomeness, especially if you make it right. So that was your little lesson on apples. Remember, John Chapman did exist. Oh, I forgot. The reason he planted the apple trees was a loophole in the Homestead Act. During the Homestead period, settlers, when they colonized or moved into land that was unoccupied, had so many years to establish productive agricultural areas. So he would actually look at the map in advance and figure out where people are going to go, and he paddled a little dugout canoe full of seeds that he got from nearby cider houses that made hard cider. And he would figure out where people would be in about 4 years and plant the seeds on the riverbanks. There was pretty good soil. He'd hire someone to take care of them. And indirectly, he got to homestead a huge amount of land, but he also sold all of these apple trees about 4 years later, so settlers using the Homestead Act could have instant homestead. So he did exist. He just didn't plant them for food. He planted them for hard cider. But you shouldn't drink hard cider till you're of legal age and in moderation.